Just when I thought things couldn't get any more fun, any more explosive, any more exciting, I was lucky enough to come across the Spirit of Galanor and Spirit of Star Eater Scales class item. Man, there's so much to go over, so stay tuned for that. All that being said, if you want to see more Nubuilds content and more Destiny 2 content in the future, then be sure as always to like, comment, and subscribe. And let's get straight into the video. So in the blueprint section, we're going to go over briefly what the game plan is of the particular build. So the MVP, of course, is none other than the new exotic class armor, or the Hunter, that gives you 2 random rolls. And I was super excited about this because I was looking forward to these 2 perks for a while, and that being the Spirit of Galanor and Spirit of the Star Eater. And so Galanor states that hits and final blows with your super will return super energy after it ends, while Star Eater states that while your super energy is full, picking up an orb of power overcharges your super, granting it bonus damage. So the beauty of this is that it's pretty straightforward. It really just focuses around your super. It focuses around you gathering as much resources as you can, most notably your orbs of power, to feed into your Star Eater. And once you have your max stacks on your Star Eater, you're able to blow all that damage into a boss for that explosive burst finish. And that's the beauty of this build. This build is all about that burst damage on a boss enemy, or just about any content you prefer. But of course, up against a big boss, you're going to be doing some big damage. So as far as the actual supers are concerned, one thing I love about this is that because it's focusing primarily on your supers, you can really swap between whichever one you feel is best for the specific content you're going after. In this case, for me, I was doing some damage testing earlier, and Silk Strike was really effective against the more close range combat bosses, where if I'm up against a more long range target, then Golden Gun Marksman is a treat because this thing does mad damage when you pair it up with the right weapons for your disposal. So we'll go over the aspects again in the fragments much later in the video, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I just wanted to give a brief overview as to what the game plan is, what you're trying to do with the build. And so now let's move into actual weapons and how it can be effective for you. Let's talk about weapons and what these weapons are capable of depending on what you're really up against. Now, the beauty of this build is that it's very flexible, as I mentioned before, and that you really are trying to build up into your super. So depending on what I'm actually running, if I'm running with the Silk Strike super, I'll typically want to run with weapons that complement that particular playstyle. Silk Strike is typically more of that close to mid-range combat, and it pairs well with my combination blow, grapple, and Winter Shroud and Gunpowder Gamble aspects. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, what is explosive enough to build into my super? So typically in that sense, I'll go with something like the Cryosthesia to freeze targets, slowing them down, helping me to punch things easier. I'll go with Final Warning to sever targets, which is great for bosses because of the damage. Then also I have Bad Juju, which also grants me super energy, so builds more into that super. And I've got something more mid to long range just to balance things out. So I have a sniper rifle. In this case, I have Ikelos, which is rapid fire frame, so I can shoot, a lot faster and build momentum. And then lastly, this all depends too, but I typically run with Suspectum 4FR, the new LFR that just came out this season, as well as Ill Omen, depending on what I really have in front of me. Of course, I also run with Fallen Guillotine. Either or will work. And so again, this comes down to personal preference, but typically if I'm close range, I want to be having these types of weapons on me, and then just have something that's a little bit mid to long range to balance things out. Now that's for the Silk Strike. Now if I'm running something like the Golden Gun Marksman, I want to have something a little bit more mid to long range. So I'll typically still keep the Ikelos SR here, or I'll just swap over to Still Hunt because it's really, really strong right now. And then I'll have something like the Call just to sever and take care of targets really easily, and then finish them off with the Suspectum 4FR as well. So all of this can really just be flexible, and that's the beauty about this build, is as long as it's building into the neutral game, that is, you want to be punching targets, freezing targets, just neutralizing as much as you can, and building up as much orbs of power as you possibly can. and then using that as your resource to pump into your Spirit of Galanor Star Eater builds, you should be good to go. So that being said, let's just jump right into things, into the nitty gritty, that being the aspects and fragments. I want to thank you all so much for making it this far in the video. It really means a lot to the channel, and I'm very grateful. With that being said, we're going to jump into aspects and fragments, then we're going to wrap things up with the armor mods as well as the seasonal artifact. So aspect wise, why is Gunpowder Gamble and Winter's Shroud such a fun pairing? Well, for one, when you are able to grapple or freeze targets and punch them with combination blow, you instantly unlock your Gunpowder Gamble stacks. So for example, if I grapple into a bunch of adds and I just punch them into space, that Gunpowder Gamble is active right away, as you'll see on screen. Same thing with the Winter's Shroud combination blow. Once I freeze a target or freeze multiple targets and then punch them all, that Gunpowder Gamble comes right back. So as long as you're able to pay attention to the cooldown of your Gunpowder Gamble, you can technically always have that grenade active to therefore just funnel into clearing adds or doing more damage to bosses and boss phases. The next up, fragments. Faceted Protection is the quintessential fragment for this build, since you're always going to be surrounded by enemies, since you're always going to be up close and personal anyway. And so when you're Transcendent, this is also amplified, which then moves into things like Devotion, which we'll get into very soon. So next we have Facet of Ruin, which increases the size and damage of the burst when you shatter a stasis crystal or frozen target, and increases the area effect of solar ignitions. This ties in really well with both the Winter's Shroud and Gunpowder Gamble, and funny enough, the animation or image on the Facet of Ruin sort of matches that. And so it works perfectly because you're going to get more ignition from your grenade, and you're just going to have a greater burst when it comes to Winter's Shroud after you punch things, and thus that gives you just a little bit more AoE control to deal with more adds. So next, Facet Devotion. Defeating targets afflicted with stasis or strand debuffs grants bonus light transcendence energy. So this is wonderful because this really helps to just kill off two birds with one stone. You're always going to be using darkness energy anyway with Winter's Shroud and your grapple alongside your respective weapon loadout, and that's just going to funnel into your light energy. So you're just hitting both transcendence meters at the same time, which is fantastic. You're going to always have that meter active, therefore giving you that additional damage and of course extra grenades to throw at targets. So this is really good. And of course this pairs well into your protection, since when you're Transcendent, that effect of damage resistance is going to be amplified. So the faster you can get your Transcendence, the better. Next, we have Facet of Courage, where your Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. So in this case, we have Combination Blow. We're going to be doing increased damage with this, which is fantastic because you're always going to be up close and, you know, just forcing your will upon the enemy with Winter's Shroud and freezing them, and then just uppercutting them into oblivion. And then next we have Facet of Purpose, where picking up an Overpower grants either Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield, depending on the super that you are utilizing. In my case, since I mentioned earlier that I do like to go between Silk Strike and Golden Gun Marksman, I'm going to either have Woven Mail or Restoration active. Now, there are times where I will use Silence and Squall, but that all depends on my other builds. In this particular build, specifically, I use Silk Strike and Marksman, since I want to either have that Woven Mail or just have that nice additional restoration to heal. And then lastly, a Facet of Defiance, where finishers create a detonation that either jolts, scorches, slows, severs, or makes targets volatile based on the damage type of your super. So once again, all depending on what I'm rocking. If I rock the Silk Strike, I'll be severing targets, and if I'm rocking with the Marksman, I'll be scorching them, which pairs well into your Gunpowder Gamble, because you're going to get more ignition anyway, which is fantastic. So either or, Defiance really just amplifies everything, making it so that you can sever targets, you can just grapple into them and just blow them up, and it's just a rinse and repeat healthy gameplay loop in a neutral game, which all then helps to funnel into your super and mods, which we'll get into right now. So as far as mods are concerned, we have ashes to assets as well as hands-on. And so all of these in tandem both give us bonus super energy on the respective kills, that being grenade or melee. Next up for our gauntlets, we have the firepower as well as heavy-handed, both of which give us orbs of power, depending on whether we use a grenade or a melee. Next, we have the chest armor, where we have concussive dampener as well as melee damage resistance. So all AoE damage we resist, and melee damage we resist as well, which is going to be great since we're always going to be up in the face of the enemy anyway, which is great. And then we have leg armor, where we have stasis weapon surge and strand weapon surge as well as recuperation. So this of course is all dependent on what you want to rock. You can rock with either solar weapon surge or whatever surge you want. But in my case, since I tend to rock a lot with the cryosthesia and the final warning or the call and the suspectum, for example, I want to be able to have that stasis weapon surge and strand weapon surge active so I can do more damage on the fly. And that all pairs well into the Super 2, since I'll be using more of that strand to just do that extra damage with the Galanor and Star Eater scales combination. And then lastly, we have the Hunter Cloak, where we have Outreach, Reaper, and Proximity Ward. So this one you can swap off whichever you want. If you want to go double Outreach, so totally up to you. In my case, I just like having that nice overshield when I perform a finisher. And since I'm always going to be around enemies constantly when they're weakened, this will always give me a chance to have that overshield every single time. And then Reaper is just great since, this gives me that weapon final blow, giving it overpower, which is also fantastic, building more into that weapon surge. And then of course Outreach, just reducing that melee cooldown, therefore giving me more activity in close range. So that in itself right there is a nutshell of the gameplay loop, where you want to get in, punch, explode, get in, punch, explode, and then save all that resource for the boss and just blow them up into outer space. So then lastly, we'll wrap things up with the actual journal. And here we have the anti-barrier pulse rifle, unstoppable sidearm, overload hand cannon, as well as overcharge armory. And this is weapons with the dealer's choice, radiolaria transposer, collective purpose, and sundering origin traits are always going to be overcharged weapons for when you have that modifier active. Next, we have the authorized mod elemental charge. Now this one I just have just because depending on my builds, I want to have this active so I can have more flexibility to therefore allow more armor charge to sustain my build. Next up, we have elemental siphon, where rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon or a weapon matching your equip super create an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super. So elemental siphon as well as elemental charge work well together, and again this depends on the build that I'm actually rocking with, but I think it's still a good pairing nonetheless. Then of course creeping chill is fantastic since I'm always using stasis weapons anyway, and this states that stasis weapon final blows against slowed or frozen targets will release a burst that slows, so even more burst potential with regards to stasis. Next we have threaded blast, where destroying a tangle with a strand weapon creates a larger and more damaging explosion. So depending on what I'm rocking for the day, if I'm rocking with final warning or the call or breach light for example, being able to get that tangle after my grapple is going to be great, because if I shoot it, there's more AoE damage. Then we have radiant orbs, which gives me radiance for that extra damage output when it comes to my super. Galvanic armor is great for when I actually have that combination blow, or just in general because it reduces more damage while I'm amplified, and when I'm punching things I get amplified as well. And then next we have shield crush. While you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or a Void Overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. So because we have Woven Mail active, we're going to get that increased damage to our punches, and this is while you're amplified or radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. So that goes into our grapple. So all that in tandem just kind of melds well together, giving us a nice consistent flow of damage output and also survivability. And then lastly, we have transference, where gain increased grenade and melee damage while transcendent, weapon final blows while transcendent, refund light and dark energy after transcendence ends. So all this ties well into our fragments as earlier. And then of course we get more grenade, and melee damage while Transcendence. So all that together funnels into Transcendence being active really fast, thus giving us just, again, constant stream of damage, consistent gameplay flow in the neutral game, all building up into that super. Therefore, just blow up and just kill the enemy in front of you. So all that being said, I hope that this has given you a good look and overview to this particular build with the Spirit of Galanor and Star Reader. At the end of the day, it really is just funneling everything, having a strong neutral game, building up into your super, and then come boss phase, you can just blow your load and just do all that damage you need with your respective super and your weapons included. So thank you all once again for tuning in. As always, new warriors, stay strong, keep fighting, and may the force be with you all, always. See you next time on the new builds, with more new builds along the way. Much love, and take care. Peace.